Ghost stories? Nah, we don't have anything like that around here. We do have the story of Jacob, but that's about as close as you'll get. You really want to know? Well, I'm not supposed to tell you, but alright. Just no interrupting. I don't have the patience for it. How to describe Jacob Emory? Well, I guess you could say he was the kind of guy you could never take notice of. This isn't to say he was a bad kid in any case. Many people in this town thought he was just the most reliable person for an odd job in the state, but he never really excelled at anything. He was living proof behind the statement, "Jack of all trades, ace of none." Most of this was due to his own lack of will. He dabbled in damn near everything this town could offer him. Automobiles, radio operation, store management, and what have you. But he never stuck to anything. His friends and workers went after him about it numerous times, but everyone got the same unsatisfying response. It just wasn't enough. Needless to say, any friends he kept were either very patient or never spoke of the matter altogether. It was probably inevitable then that Jacob would leave to go abroad. I don't remember where he went, but I think Gertrude down the street knew before she passed on. You'll have to scout someone else for that information. In any case, no one even tried to stop him. Everyone thought a little travel would stamp out the ambition of him, or else feed it until it was no longer an issue. Hell, we even gave him a sending off party, which I thought was pretty nice of everybody. So anyway, he goes for 6-7 years, can't remember. You'll have to check with someone else about that too. Anyway, he came back eventually, and he had changed, obviously enough. He was an affable, energetic, all smiles all the time, and very quickly we learned why. He showed us a souvenir he brought back, a solid black stick, the length of a pencil, but the texture of chalk. We all wondered why on earth should such a simple thing promote such a spring in his step, until he gave us his demonstration. He took a piece of paper, and with this stick, God, there's got to be a better word for it. With this stick, he drew a crude circle. It dropped and rested on the border of the paper, like a stone. It didn't leave the paper, but it just acted on it, sort of like an old movie projector on a screen. Son, I know how crazy that sounds, and if you feel like playing skeptic, then you can leave an old man to his craziness. But I know what I saw, even if everyone's been hushing it up. And that stone he drew dropped. Jake even passed the paper around, and as it was being passed, it rolled around the paper as it got tilted. None of us had any words for it. Hell, what was there to say? But he continued drawing demonstration after demonstration for us, stick figures in various pageants and plays, doing everything from fighting each other to making perfect human pyramid, and we thought it was incredible. That was all the go-ahead he needed. He announced that he planned to put on a show to pay for rent and food, where he would draw anything the crowd members wanted. That we talked to some length about. He eventually convinced us that he would be safe, his drawings ethical, the practice lucrative and unique, and the attention would not go anywhere outside the town's borders. Poor Jacob. If I'd not been so swept away in the moment, I might have read the signs right there and then, and saved the sorry son of a bitch by snapping that terrible thing in half. But I was younger. We all were. And we saw no problem with encouraging him with what we all saw was an incredible experience to be shared with everyone. Now, he didn't have any big radio or television connections, mind you, and the internet wouldn't come around for another decade. So he did what all people with the shoestring budget would do. He advertised his shows with flyers. Flyers might not mean anything to you city folk, but in a small town, they gain a fair glance, time to time. And what's more, Jacobs managed to stick out by having little stick figures jump up and down and whatnot to get people's attention. His first show must have gotten nearly 60 or so people, probably a lot more than that. And his shows were fantastic. Someone would shout out a scene from a play or a comedy sketch, and Jake's hand would fly over the white wall like a bird. He'd been holding back when he made that stone, that's for damn sure. His illustrations were spot on, and he could make an incredible human figure in minutes. Come to think of it, I don't remember any of his scenes lasting more than 10 minutes to make. They were all really well done scenes too. Not only could you see a knight charge in the castle, Jake would draw the castle's interior as well, like a wedding cake split down the middle. So you could see the knight scale the walls, fight his way through the levels of the dungeon, fight back out with the princess, and make a leap off the castle parapets onto his getaway horse, all in complete silence. Not realistic, no, but that was the part of the appeal. None of us went there expecting something real. When a scene or sketch was finished, either the character would leave off a wall or he'd be covered with white paint. This is good, in a way. It gave these shows time limit, so that when he finished with all the 4 walls in the room, everyone knew the show was over until the paint dried. Jake, meanwhile, was changing in a bad way. I'd mentioned that upon his return, he'd been extremely energetic. Well, that energy, that vitality or fervor or whatever you want to call it, it never left him, not for an instant. Far from it. It seemed to grow on him, and he enjoyed it all too much. His eyes grew wider, he slept gradually less over time. His statements and opinions more radical and frenzied. And though he never was a pushover, he was starting to make other people nervous in his company. A month or two passed, and Jake's audience grew like wildfire. Nearly everyone in the town paid to see Jake's art in action, and he had to rent out larger and larger places for them to sit. He now didn't stop after one scene was done. He moved directly on to the next, put on the next blank space on the wall, sometimes to the intriguing effect that causes the scenes to mingle, which the crowd loved. Each subject matter got even more wild and immoral. The monsters grew more bizarre and creative, figures using more impossible weaponry, all for the sake of the crowd's interest. Jake got steadily more indulgent, which we figured was from the money. He became a drinker and a womanizer, neither of which got rid of the vitality, by the way. Some of those women claimed that they woken up in the middle of the night to see him scrambling with a stick on the drawing pad, a gigantic grin on his face, while most of them said they'd assume he was drawing them in the nude. There's rumors that 1 or 2 of them got glances at that notepad. Those anonymous few were supposedly said that those drawings absolutely weren't pictures of them in the nude, but neither of them, whoever they are, will say what he was drawing. Don't bother looking for the notepads or flyers. They're all gone now. I'm getting off track. The point is, he was hitting the bottle, and that's important, because it was his drinking that would eventually ruin him. On the night of one of his performances, as he walked in front of a cheering crowd, it was immediately apparent to everyone that he was completely drunk. I was in the front row, and I could smell the bourbon on him from 10 feet away. The show started. He went through the bunch of sketches and scenarios the crowd recommended, and at the end, someone asked him to draw himself. Everyone cheered the idea. I guess they'd been wondering what his creations thought of him, and he eventually obliged. No sooner had Jake finished connecting the final 2 lines on his coat, that every single character across the vast, expansive wall would stop and look directly at that illustration. Lovers stopped kissing, clowns stopped laughing, robots stopped fighting pirates. Everything stopped and looked at Jacob's illustration. The crowd almost died instantly. I remember Jake's face at that moment. Pale white, full of terrible comprehension at his mistake, and looking desperately for the cans of white paint he'd forgotten to put out before the show. Everyone else, they were looking at the fake Jacob. That Jacob reached into his pocket and pulled out a stick of his own, and as we all watched, drew a door. He pushed on his side of the door, swung open, allowing him to walk through onto the floor of the auditorium. The rest was an absolute hellish pandemonium. People screamed and ran for the exit as Jacob's characters, both those currently on the wall and those which he had previously left before covering up, ran out of their own exits, throwing piles, shooting lasers, blowing fire and poison, and the impossible. I was near enough the exit to escape, and gave only one backward glance. The scene will haunt me forever. Jacob Emory being dragged by his creations, kicking and screaming through the door the copy made. The auditorium burned down, obviously enough, but I have no idea how many characters escaped, what happened to the fake Emory, or how many people died. The fire brought the fire department from the nearest city up to over 100 miles away. They in turn brought the police force, which brought the government, which touched everything up. They took the flyers and any art Jacob had made, and swore everyone to secrecy or else life detainment. The fire was blamed on a cigarette in the garbage during a basketball game, and we all eventually went on with our lives. Jacob was made to never existed. In retrospect, I realize everything. Jacob hadn't been creating illustrations. Illustrations don't move, much less act or attack. They're just images people see, shadows made to look like real things. Jacob had been making life, actual thinking things in some alternate dimension, using a power that was never meant to fall into mortal hands. He got drunk on that power. His punishment was probably well deserved. Incidentally, the government screwed up on 2 different accounts. They did a damn good job silencing everyone, but proof remains. The ruins are still there, you know, the auditorium's ruins. I hear they're going to start reconstruction soon, which will wipe out any remaining evidence someone can definitely see. But I went back there once, several years after the fire. Just once. Amidst the rubble, covered in ash, I saw something squirming. I looked closer. It was Jacob Emory's hand on the wall, exactly like it had been 3 years ago. Sweaty, calloused, I remember. But it was constantly flailing, as if the body was supposed to be attached to what was withering in flames. That was mistake number 1. Number 2 was those creations. Like I said, I don't know how many escaped, nor how many the government agents found and caught. But I will say only this. Those tall grass meadows on the outskirts of town, don't go to them. Ever. You were asking about those white figures you've been seeing at night, right? This town doesn't have any ghost stories.